Hey, everybody, welcome to a video portion of Philly Man and Jersey Man magazine. My name is Ken Dunnick. I'm the publisher, ex-Philadelphia Eagles tight end, and I'm very pleased to introduce the voice of ESPN Sunday Night Baseball and the new Chicago Cubs play-by-play man, Jon Sciambi. Jon, welcome to Philly Man, Jersey Man magazine.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Great. So I know you're a Philly guy. You were born in the city. Talk to me a little bit about the early memories that you have of Philly, and according to the conversations we had prior to this interview, you still kind of follow the Philly teams, right?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, those were my teams. My mom was from Montclair, New Jersey. My dad was from Philadelphia. They met at Drexel in Philly, got married, had me. We lived in Philadelphia till I was 6, then Jersey and Montclair for 1 year, and then moved to New York. But my dad's side of the family, they were all Philly fans. My mom's side, they were all Yankee fans and New York fans. My dad's side got their hooks in me, and it just kind of stayed. I went as a kid, we went to the vet. My grandfather was head of construction for the vet. And so those were all my teams growing up. So even when I came to New York, I was with all my friends who were Yankees, Mets fans, Giants, Jets fans, and I was an Eagles fan or a Phillies fan. So that was my childhood for sure.
So your dad was head of construction for the vet. I think
My grandfather.
Your grandfather.
Yeah.
So I think that was in the mid 60s, right? The vet, I believe, launched around 67 or so. Or...
I think it was a little later than that. I believe that the early 70s was the first year of the vet. And it's funny because I don't remember what the actual connection was, but through something in construction, we got to meet my favorite Eagle, who's, we got to have lunch with him, that guy he developed a friendship with, who my favorite Eagle was Keith Krepfle.
Oh, well, he was my teammate on the
Yeah.
1980 NFC Championship team. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we were at the 80 NFC Championship game when Wilbert went, 42 yards off tackle after
you were freezing in the stands like everybody else.
After Jaws overthrew Harold, and I mean, it was just so loud. My dad still has the VCR tape of Tom Brookshire and Pat Summerall calling that game.
Great
and
call.
Just the so being there, we were freezing. It's as cold as I've ever been. And I remember as the clock ticked down, then putting up on one of those just little micro boards, the temperature in the Superdome is 72 and dry. It was great.
Yeah, great memory. One of the most memorable plays in Philly sports history.
Absolutely. Just that, that classic sports moment of he hands off to him and he hits the hole and the crowd roars, and then you realize he's got daylight and is at the, on the angle, and it just keeps rising. I have goosebumps right now. Straight up goosebumps just thinking about it. Yeah. I love that team so much. Like, I think I could come close to doing the 22, right? Just off the top of my head right now.
Okay, let's go defensive backfield.
Roynell Young.
Very good.
Herm Edwards.
Very good.
Bernard Wilson.
And you got to have the strong safety.
Randy Logan.
Oh, that's excellent. You just passed the Eagles test, man. That's good stuff.
And I mean, I haven't studied that in I don't even know how long. And then the linebacker.
Well, Bernard Wilson is the tough one to come up with. You got that right away.
And then, I mean, my dad's guy was Bill Berge.
Oh, sure.
I've never gotten a dog. But if I ever get a dog, I want to name him Berge. I feel like it's a great dog name. So my dad loved Bill Berge. Obviously, Jerry Robinson was a stud, and then Frank LeMaster.
Sure.
Who else?
Here's something past the second test. Give me the offensive line.
Yeah, I don't think I could do it all. I know Guy Morris was the center.
Right.
Jerry Sizemore.
Right tackle.
Yeah.
Stan Walters, left tackle.
Stan Walters, okay, yeah.
Now the right guard is tough. That was Woody Peoples.
Yeah, I wouldn't
And
have
then
come up
the left guard was PD Perot. So you did
with
pretty
Perot.
good,
I
though.
wouldn't have,
Most people
yeah.
wouldn't have even attempted that. So, and by the way, since you're such an Eagles fan, when they start alumni events again, I'm going to invite you as my guest to the Eagles alumni event. You can come and meet all of your heroes
That would be so amazing.
and have a good time. But on the flip side, you got to have me to Wrigley Field, and we'll do a little Cubs
The
Eagles.
invitation right here, right now. On
Wonderful.
the field, in the booth, you got it.
So talk to me a little bit about Philly. You're growing up in Philly, and then you moved to New York, and that's where you went to high school.
Yeah. So, and my grandparents were still in Phillies, and we would actually take the train. My dad lived in New York, and my parents were divorced. We would take the train down. We'd take Amtrak down and go see Eagles games, or drive sometimes. My grandparents lived out in Norristown, Plymouth Meeting area. But yeah, I grew up on a little island called Roosevelt Island. It's
Mhm.
underneath the 59th Street Bridge. I ended up going to a Jesuit high school, Regis High School. Regis Philbin is named after the high school. His dad went there. Regis did not.
Interesting.
And is an all boys Jesuit school. It was founded in 1913, 13 or 14. I really should get that right. But for underprivileged Catholic kids to get an elite level education. So it was all academic scholarship. It was an amazing place to go to school. Now, the funny thing is that from a football standpoint, I loved it. And I don't think it would have worked out for me, but like I had good hands and I always wanted to be a tight end, like a receiving tight end. I ended up being like 6 feet tall, probably 6'1" media guide height. Um, but my but my childhood, baseball was the sport.
Hmm.
And growing up in New York City, I honestly couldn't tell you where I would have played organized football. I was never around or saw any place ever that had organized football where they played with equipment or had any idea where you would have signed up to play it.
No
It
Pop
just
Warner or
nope.
anything like that, huh?
So baseball was the sport. And I went to high school and I was made the varsity as a sophomore. And I went to college I was a preferred walk on at College of William and Mary in Virginia, which is low level D1. I was terrible. I ended up getting hurt. I transferred to Boston College. And that was really where my want to broadcast
Right.
accelerated. But, back in the day, listening to Harry Callis, listening to, you know, uh, Matt Gukas's dad did the PA at the vet, and
Yeah.
just those are the things I think about, from my early childhood.
Right. So let's go to college, where really your broadcast career was launched. You worked at the college station, I believe the call letters were WZBC, and
Yep.
among others, I think Joe Tessitore worked there too, right at the
Joe
same time.
Tessitore and Bob Wischusen, who's the voice of the New York Jets. So, we're not Syracuse, but we had a really good draft class that year, is what I like to say. Yeah, those guys were my friends, and we did a sports talk show together. We did some play by play, and that's really where it started for me in college, where I started to shape what I wanted to do. At that time, I think I was more interested in doing, sports radio was really booming then. And I think I wanted to be a Mike and the Mad Dog type
Hmm.
talk show host. Um, but college was where it really started. We got a chance to be on the air. That was cool.
Sure. What sports did you cover for Boston College for the radio station?
More basketball and football. Like I didn't get a chance to do, I got cut from the baseball team and they didn't do the games on the radio. They did hockey was the other sport they did on the radio. So, play by play was not really my focus then. So I didn't get a chance to do baseball until Bob Wischusen went down to Miami. Um, he helped get me a job. My first job, by the way, was at as a like professionally broadcasting was at WESB in Bradford, Pennsylvania.
Hmm. I don't even know where Bradford, Pennsylvania is.
It's called the refrigerator of Pennsylvania. It's basically it's 45 minutes south of Olean, New York, an hour and a half south of Buffalo.
Okay,
You're going to need to fact check that, by the way.
I am.
But it's 3 hours ish north and east of Pittsburgh. I mean, it's just, and I got to DJ and board out Pirates games and do news and sports and everything. Yeah.
And what year were you there?
I was there in 1993.
Okay.
And
So
I had to take a job as well to supplement my income. And I did for one night, I quit after one night, but I was the midnight to 8 donut maker at the local supermarket.
now you break in with your baseball broadcasting career with the Marlins in '97, right? How did
Yeah.
that all come about?
So the part I went down to, I was in Bradford for 9 months or thereabouts. I went down to Miami. I slept on Bob Wischusen's couch. And I started to climb because I'd been on the air a little bit in Bradford. I was probably a little more advanced as a 23-year-old. So I started to do updates and then talk. And then I did part-time talk. And then, I started as a board op, basically.
Mhm.
So eventually I started to go to Marlins games. We had a press pass and we could go to any games. And back then the food was free.
It's a
So
big deal,
you'd go to the
right?
game, you go
Sure.
watch the game, and you'd eat for free.
Mhm.
And I started going to empty booth and doing a game into a tape recorder, which I eventually did enough games that I put together a tape. I gave it to some people, and eventually I landed a job doing short season A in Boise, Idaho. And along the way, I had been sort of using the Marlins director of broadcasting, to mentor me. And in '97, they really reshuffled all their broadcasting. They wanted to do their two radio guys. They took one of them, Joe Angel, put him on TV. They had one TV analyst, and then Dave O'Brien stayed on radio, and they would flip in the middle innings. And so they needed somebody to do pregame, postgame, in-game scores, a little bit of in-game color, and eventually it became play-by-play. Maybe less than 10 innings in '97, and then just each year more and more till I was in 2000 or 2001 a full-time play-by-play guy.
Yeah, had to be thrilling just getting your foot in the door for that
It was
job.
amazing.
Yeah.
And I got a chance to be down there and learn how to do it. But I stunk at the beginning. I was terrible. I was bad in Boise, and I was aware. I wasn't sure. The game is slow, but it gets very fast. The other sports to call really go at a very similar pace. Baseball is just ball one outside, ball two outside. It's in the dirt. The runners are running. Like all of a sudden it's slow and it can get fast, and it's a real challenge. And I wasn't very good. I just needed a lot of reps, and I got better, but I loved it.
Yeah.
I just loved it.
And there's a lot of fill in baseball play-by-play
right.
broadcasting.
That's
so you
right.
have to tell stories, and
Yeah.
and, a little bit different than radio because TV is really showing you the picture. Radio, you have
Yeah, that's right. And so, I can still remember I was on the food line at Pro Player Joe Robbie Stadium and hearing the voice ahead of me saying, "I'll have some lasagna, green beans." And I was like, "Oh my God." And I looked down and he was wearing the white shoes, and it was Harry Callis.
Oh, wow.
And then a couple years later, I got to interview him. And it's one of those things too, where, people will say, "Hey, I like your voice." But I've interviewed Harry Callis. And when I'm interviewing Harry Callis, it feels as though my voice is, "So, Harry, I
Exactly.
was wondering if you could answer a question." That's how it feels when you're talking
He
to
had
Harry.
the pipes. He had
He
the
had the pipes.
the gravelly pipes, right? So you go from the Marlins to the Braves, right?
So I went from the Marlins, and then I went 2 years to ESPN, and I was doing sports talk radio. In '05 and '06, I went and I did college basketball Major League Baseball on TV, Major League Baseball on the radio. And then in 07, 08, 09, I went to the Braves. So that was my first sort of dipping my toe in the water of working for ESPN. The time when I was with the Braves in the off season, I still did college basketball and probably a handful of, like, I didn't do every Braves game. I think I did 120. So I would fill in on an ESPN game here or there. And then in 2010, I came back full time.
Now the Braves, wasn't Skip Carey with the Braves
It
at that
was.
point?
Yeah.
So now how did the Sunday night baseball deal come about for you? I think you replaced Schulman, right?
So I replaced Gary Thorne after he had replaced Schulman. I think that's right. But I had filled in. I'd been doing the playoffs. I was one of the 4 playoff announcers on the radio since 2005. And I also wanted to get back to New York. I missed the Northeast. I wanted to get back to New York and live in New York. And I could, for that job, I could work wherever. And yeah, that was the job I really wanted. I wanted to do that. And so 2010, it ended up happening. And slowly that, morphed from doing every Sunday. And then I would do a TV game on Sunday, or a TV game on Wednesday, and a radio game on Sunday. And then I started doing some Baseball Tonight for a few years. So, my plate's been pretty full.
Interesting. So now you have been named the play-by-play guy for the Chicago Cubs. And I have to tell you, as a Cubs fan, from as early as I can remember, I was born in 57. I probably was aware of the Cubs in the early 60s. I think my dad brought me to a Cubs game. My first game was in 62. It was against the Phillies, and I remember Clay Dalrymple was the catcher for the Phillies. That's the only, and maybe Tony Gonzalez, or I can't remember exactly, but I remember that we got second row behind home plate, and the box seats were $5 a piece, and that was my first Cubs experience. And after watching on black and white TV back then, I remember even as a young child, when I walked through those gates, the colors absolutely explode at you because you're used to seeing that visual in black and white. So, and listen, Jack Brickhouse was an incredible play-by-play guy, followed by Harry Carey. Skip Carey took over for a few years, and then, interestingly enough, you're very good friends with the guy that you're replacing, Len Casper. Talk a little bit about Len and your relationship. And who does what he does? Who walks away from this to go do radio for the White Sox? And then you're going to partner with Jim Deshaies, who I think is one of the most clever analysts in baseball. Talk to me a little bit about those relationships.
So Len and I met in Miami. We were together with the Marlins. He came, I think, in 2001. And we were just fast friends. We're the same age. He was doing TV. I was doing radio. When he left at the end of the 04 season, I left at the end of the 04 season and to go do ESPN, and he went to go join the Cubs. I don't think the average person or even people in the business quite process the fact that, take football out of it, but in the other local sports, you're used to hearing your local TV announcer. And your local TV announcer does every game the entire year.
Right.
And then you get to the playoffs and you're done.
Exactly.
Because national takes over.
Right.
And Len had been there 16 years. He saw them break the curse, win it all. He'd seen the biggest event that could possibly happen. He's a kid who grew up in Detroit, big Ernie Harwell fan. He always had love for radio. It wasn't about money. And at this point, I think he felt like he'd seen it. He loved it, but he really wanted to call playoff games. And here's the counter. I've been calling playoff games since 2005 nationally, and it's awesome. Like, calling playoff games is incredible. Not calling playoff games after a while really stinks.
Sure.
And so he wanted to try something different. I mean, it's look, we talked about it. I'm talking in April, we were talking about it. And I wasn't sure at the time that he would actually, as you said, it's still, I don't think everybody understood it. I still don't know that you can make it resonate with everybody. But I completely understood where he was coming from. I just didn't know if he was going to really be able to take the plunge and go do it. But again, they were offering him a big contract. He wasn't going to have to move. And so we just kept talking through it. And then as it inched closer, he was saying, I think this is really going to happen.
Mm.
But all along, he and I are really close. I mean, as close a friend as I have in broadcasting. All I was thinking about is I want my friend to be happy.
Mm.
And I like my gig at ESPN. So when he left, I mean, I had people asking me, would you be interested? He and I didn't even really talk about it, and I just never thought about it. And so, for example, I mean, I've probably done 100 games at Wrigley Field. I've been doing this for a while. But I just had never processed what it was like. I know what it's like doing a game at Wrigley Field as the visiting announcer and what it's like doing a game at Wrigley Field as a national announcer. I never processed what it was like to be in his shoes as the hometown announcer. Like, I never sat in it, and just thought about, okay, what would this actually be like? And even when he decided to take the White Sox job, I didn't think about it. And then they came and asked me if I would be interested. And then every time I retell this, it sounds funny, but I just didn't think about it. I liked my gig. And then they talked to me and I kind of just sat with it. And I was like, yeah, that would be really amazing. I love that town. I like how much baseball matters there. That franchise is important in the sport. There's a specialness to, they play all those day games. It's not just Chicagoland. It's the fact that they were on GN all those years and so many places, people that didn't have access to baseball. Before the Rockies came into existence, people became Cubs fans because they could watch Harry on WGN. And then, as you mentioned, the legendary broadcasters. And the more I sat with it, the more I thought, yeah, this would be really special. And I think I probably, and then the only way I was going to go after it is if I knew that they offered it to me, that I would take it. I did not want to put myself in and at the end say, I don't want to do that. But the team and Marquee Sports Network, they were really flattering about it. Yeah. And I
got to tell you, when I first heard the news that Len was leaving, I was really pissed off because I really, really liked him as a broadcaster. And obviously, you're his close friend. There's a sincerity that comes across with him in broadcasting that
100%.
is very, very unique.
Yes.
So now I'm sitting there thinking, well, who's going to replace him? I'm not going to like anybody that's going to replace this guy. Yeah. And again, this is going to sound patronizing. I knew your work on the periphery. I didn't watch a whole lot of Sunday night baseball. I usually just watch Cubs games. And when they announced you as the guy, I was like, that's the guy. And I don't even know you really, but I'm like, that's the guy. He's sincere. He loves the baseball. Obviously, being the Cubs play-by-play announcer is a huge deal. And and so those were my thoughts. And then when I saw the media reports of how everybody, applauded the pick, it had to make you feel great, didn't it? I mean, about the reception that you got.
It did. It was, it was overwhelming. It was overwhelming. Look, it's dangerous space to rely on external validation to fuel you because you can't control that. But I was able to take it in and just appreciate it. And the amount, the response, I mean, I spent 3 days with 200 unread texts on my phone. I would get it down to 100 and go back up to 200. And then on social media, people just tweeting at me. And it was just, yeah, it was a little overwhelming how overwhelmingly positive the response was. And I was just so flattered by it. So, I don't know what to say about that.
No,
It's quite cool.
good for you. And not that you need my advice, but I'll give it to you anyway. I mean, if you love Wrigley Field and you love the Cubs, that will come through, and
Yeah.
that's all really people care about. I mean, Jack Brickhouse was the biggest homer there could ever be, but he loved that team so much,
Yeah.
and then that came through in his broadcasting. So let's talk a little bit about your relationship with David Ross. Now, you worked with
Yeah.
him at ESPN.
Yeah.
Is that going to be an advantage for you as a broadcaster to get
I
some
I
info?
would say so. I mean, David's my friend, I like, we yeah, we talk a lot. We worked together for 3 years. Um I had the advantage of meeting David when he was with the Braves. And because of the way the other players before he got there, I had established relationships with the players that were there. I think there was an element of he felt safe around me because he saw how they reacted to me. And from that point forward, anytime I would see him, we were always connected. And then, um, towards the end of his time, like in 16, I would say, you got to come up to the booth and do this with me, and he did. And he was curious and fun. And when we talked about managing, like we talked about that ahead of time. So I'm just excited to talk baseball with him and just bounce stuff back and forth. Like I'm a little bit of a numbers nerd, and so I look at it a little bit differently, and I'm sure he'll. Yeah, we'll get into some interesting conversations, and it's just he's good at it and will continue to be really good at managing the team. And I'm biased, and I think I'm right. So that's what I would say. I think it'll be a lot of fun being around him.
It's a big jump and big shoes to fill, replacing Joe
Yeah,
Madden and a Series winner. Was he? Is he a confident guy? Was he?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
he
mean,
knew he could do
look,
the job.
he's a leader. He's a leader, and the one thing that everybody said, and I think it's always an indication of how well do you really know David. But one of the things people would ask is, you know, Riz is one of his really good friends. Lester's one of his really good friends. Arietta, like good friends. Is he going to be able to tell them the truth when they need to hear the truth? And the answer is absolutely.
Yeah.
My joke with David Ross is, can I curse on this or do you want me to not curse?
No, no, no. Go ahead. We're
He's a sneaky asshole. Everybody thinks he's like the nicest guy. He's the Dancing with the Stars guy. Nah, he's like got that edge, competitive, sneaky asshole.
right.
And if Anthony Rizzo isn't putting out 100% effort, then he's going to let him have it. And he would let him have it when he played with him, and he's going to let him have it now. And like,
Interesting.
so my joke is when I'm around him all the time, like, don't yell at me. So like I'll see him and I'll be like, don't yell at me. And he'd be like, don't ask dumb questions. So
What do you think of the current state of the Cubs? Theo leaves. Obviously, they're the state of baseball today with no fans. They're trying to
yeah.
structure contracts around that, and a lot of people think they say rebuild, but they got a pretty darn good lineup if
Yeah.
if it's a rebuild. I mean, what are your thoughts on the current state of the Cubs?
I think the division is there for the taking. I think if we're being honest with ourselves, the two best teams play in the West, the Dodgers and the Padres. I think the Mets and the Braves should be really good as well. I don't think the Central has a team that will be as good as any of those four, in my opinion. I think the Central is winnable, and a playoff spot is certainly a possibility if they do expanded playoffs again. So, I think I think you would anticipate with guys statistically, they say guys in contract years, you get like a 6% bump in OPS. Like the studies show, you just play better in a walk year. I
Mhm.
think that if you want to just say regress to the mean, I think Rizzo, Bryant, and Baez should be better. This team was 10th in the league in runs per game last year. That makes no sense.
Right.
None. I think they should be at least a slightly above average offense. I think they should be elite defensively. I don't know in today's game of baseball if they have enough thunder on the mound. That most of the elite level teams have guys throwing a bazillion, or at least a lot of guys throwing a bazillion. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
they're going to try and do it more with contact. Now they catch the ball really well. Um, I especially in the infield, they catch it well. I think they they have a chance to be, a good team. And my question would be a little bit of the pitching. I think the offense will take care of itself. They're going to have to slug, and they will swing and miss a lot. But I think they got a chance to be good, and I think they have a chance to win the division.
Were you surprised at all that the team cut the cord with Lester, who, Washington signed him on the cheap, and then they actually gave $1 million extra to Arrieta? But there may have been some budgetary issues regarding that, because I read where Ricketts actually allotted some more money after the Lester move was done. So a lot
Yeah,
of people were scratching
I'm
their
not
head.
quite sure how that played out. I think everybody was a little surprised that John left, and then I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. I know that Jake had been starving to come back for a while, so and John didn't want to leave. So look, it speaks to that place and how much people want to play there.
So let's finish up the interview with what are your thoughts on the current state of baseball? Next year they've announced they're going to do the 7 inning double headers. They're going
Right.
to start with the man on second. Do you think those changes are going to be hard to get away from doing it 2 years in a row? Or?
I'm not worried about